space. Look around at the space that we're in right now, at these walls. Historically, we have used walls to both protect us and to inspire us. The walls of a church might inspire a feeling of reverence. The walls of a civic building might inspire respect. The walls of a museum or library may inspire creativity. But our homes have typically been utilitarian places. When we go into our home, we want to feel comfort. We want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. Let me tell you a quick story. I'm one of 9 kids. I had 4 brothers and 4 sisters. And my mother, bless her heart, has welcomed each one of us home at some part in our lives when we had to, get some part of our lives straight after some misfortune or whatever. And she's pushing 80. And a few years ago, she'd about had enough of that. And she called me up and she said, "Mary, I need you to design me a house. I need you to design me a house that's big enough that I can have everyone over for dinner and small enough where no one will stay." And that started my quest for finding the perfect sized house. So, back before the 19th century, the average house size was only 450 square feet. Now think about that. Think about how many kids they had. It's not a pretty picture, but 450 square feet. During the 19th century, things grew a little bit. We started adding things like parlors, bathrooms, kitchens. But still, the average house size remained between 400 and about 800 square feet. In the early 20th century, you could pull out your Sears and Roebuck's catalog and order a house. These were called craftsman homes, and thousands of them were sold all over the United States. There are still many craftsman homes standing in towns that you might visit. The most popular craftsman homes were between 600 and 800 square feet. They had, 2 to 3 bedrooms. Very small. After World War II, though, things began to change. By the 1950s, the average home size was 1,000 square feet. And the lots that our homes were on had grown too. They doubled, tripled, and quadrupled, so that now the average home lot was a quarter acre or more. So our houses were bigger and they were further and further apart. And house sizes continued to grow. By the year 2000, the average house size was 2,000 square feet. And today, the average new house is 2,600 square feet. It's pretty odd, right? That our houses just keep getting bigger and bigger. Especially when you think back to those old Sears and Roebuck's ads. If I pull up one of those ads and look at it, it talks about the number of bedrooms. It shows a nice layout of the house. It talks about how you might use the property. It shows how it looks. Nowhere in that ad does it talk about the square footage. But today, if I have a client walk into my office, before they talk about design, before they talk about needs, before they talk about anything else, they say, "I want a house that's about 3,000 square feet." How did that happen? Well, when we have these big houses, we fill them up with things, and that made me think about our economy. So how does our economy track with house size? I looked up the gross domestic product, which if you remember your economic classes in high school, your gross domestic product is the sum total of all of your durable goods and services added up together. So if you compare the gross domestic product with house size, you can see that it tracks almost exactly. So we have these houses and we fill them up with things. We spend a lot of money. But we don't buy our cars by the cubic square foot, right? We buy our cars based on performance, based on need, based on design, based on comfort. We don't buy our cars based on the cubic foot. I bet every one of you can tell me the square footage of your house, but nobody can tell me the cubic feet of your car. And I bet most of you can tell me about how many miles per gallon your car gets, but you have no idea about the relative efficiency of your house, even though you probably complain about your utility bill. So we have this house, and we fill it up with things. We heat it, we air condition it, we insure it, we pay taxes on it, we clean it, we maintain it. We spend a lot of time and money owning a home. The average person spends 70 hours a year doing yard work, 260 hours per year doing housework, and most of you commute some distance. And the average commute in the United States is 26 and a half minutes. That adds up to 4.5 hours a week, or 230 hours per year. So add all that up together, it's 560 hours, 23 full days we spend dealing with houses that are bigger than we need, probably, on lots that are bigger than we need, that are far from the city center. That's a full month of vacation days. That's 15% of your waking hours when you're not at work are spent dealing with your house. But I bet you're thinking, I need all that space, right? I need that space. I want to challenge you to do a little exercise. Let's pretend that on the bottoms of your feet, you have ink pads, right? So for a week, you walk around your house, and you're leaving a little track or a trail of all the places that you go. Then at the end of the week, look at all those tracks and trails. Take away the wasted space like hallways, parts of rooms that you don't go to, and guess about how many square feet you're going to use in your house. About 600. Unless you're like my mom and you have 9 kids, that's different. But for most of us, it's about 600 square feet. So now you're thinking, well, all right, maybe I could live in a smaller space, but I have all these things. What do I do with all those things? Well, let's think about our house a little bit like a refrigerator. You open up your refrigerator and you see things you love, right? You see the Haagen-Dazs ice cream. You see that beautiful bunch of kale you got at the farmer's market. Things that make you happy. But behind that, there's things you don't really want to deal with. There's that, bowl of spaghetti from 3 weeks ago. There's things that really aren't useful anymore, like that shriveled bag of carrots in the bottom of the produce drawer. And there's things like the 4 kinds of mustard in that old jar of pickles that we're saving just because we might need them. Our houses are a lot like that. And if you've been watching, those organizational minimalist TV shows like Marie Kondo, you'll know that these things aren't bringing us any joy, right? But, I don't want to talk about Marie Kondo. I want to talk a little bit about cities. So, what would our cities be like if we all lived in smaller houses, on smaller lots, closer to our city centers? Bet you're thinking, wow, if there's 4 times as many people living on my block, traffic is going to be 4 times as bad, right? That's what you're all thinking. Well, one really cool thing about urbanism is that when you add more people, things like public transit become very viable, sometimes even profitable. Public services like roads, electricity, water, wastewater, the more customers you have per mile, the more efficiently those services can be delivered. And if they're delivered more efficiently, guess what? They're cheaper and they're more reliable. And cities like San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Charleston, South Carolina, those cities have been ranked as some of the healthiest cities in the United States. And why is that? Because in all those cities, when people walk out their front door to go out to dinner, they walk to dinner. They don't get in their car. And that makes for a healthier society. Now, the cities themselves, they have more money. There's better utilization of property, so they're making more tax revenue. That doesn't mean you're paying more taxes because you're living in a smaller house and a smaller lot. But they're making more money on tax revenue, and they're not spending all that money on taking all their resources to make roads and take their infrastructure out into suburbia. And I know you're thinking now, well, I like my town the way it is. If we were to densify, my town would lose its character. It would become a different place than it is now. Well, that's not necessarily true either. We just need to rethink how we utilize our buildings. So a large building, a large house, could become 4-bedroom apartments for, single women like me, where we all might share a kitchen. We might allow boarding houses again. We might take a McMansion and turn it into mansion apartments. We might allow things like accessory dwelling units or granny pods or tiny houses in people's backyards. And then when your kids come home to visit, they've got a place they can go. Or when mom wants a smaller house, she's got a place she can go. Or you might even rent it to a complete stranger. And that way we could help solve our housing crisis. We might allow tiny houses on wheels. We might even allow, heaven forbid, trailer parks if they're in the right places. But our cities don't have to change a whole lot for us to increase density. If we all were to live in a smaller house, on a smaller lot, closer to the city center, we would have more time and we would have more money. We would have time to do things, spend time with our family. We would have 23 days to go on vacation. We could take classes. We could volunteer. We could become better citizens. We could work in our churches. We could work in our communities. We could give TED Talks. And if cities had the revenue that came from having people live closer to the city center, they could do like they did 100 years ago before they spent all their money on roads in suburbia, and we could have more great civic places, more theaters and museums and parks, more places like these. If we take up less space individually, and we have more time that we can do things rather than have things, and then collectively we can have more and better things. Thank you very much.